Hello and welcome to today's episode of Talk on Things and Stuff. Today, I don't have anything particularly planned. I just figured we'd open up phone lines and see what is on the mind of anyone who happens to be listening. So if you would like to join the conversation and maybe talk about a little bit what's on your mind, you can call 210-422-2222. And, I'd be happy to take your call and see what is going on. In the meantime, because I have to have something to fill the air with, we had the pleasure of looking at a few comments of what I have affectionately referred to as the Sherry Do doozies, which if you follow or subscribe to the YouTube channel, you will have seen a few of them, which was a recent keynote talk that she gave as part of the BYU Women's Conference. So we will get to that in between calls, but it looks like we've got our first call. Hello, you are on Talk on Things and Stuff. What's on your mind?
Hi, I wanted to ask you a few questions, if that's okay.
Sure, go right ahead.
So I've been reading a lot about the cult recovery that we've been talking a lot about, and this Sherry Do, these posts that were posted recently were very upsetting to me, probably into a spin of emotions because they were so manipulative beyond what I was used to. I'm not used to that kind of, I don't remember that kind of manipulation in the Mormon church.
Was there a video in particular that set off that emotion?
Yeah, especially the one that was posted about people who leave who are expressing, trying to make excuses for their exiting. I think it was the second one you posted yesterday, trying to share with you excuses for why they left, justifying their reasons for leaving. It was very triggering to me because I hadn't seen that direct kind of cult behavior so publicly displayed. It was interesting because I have a daughter who's rejecting me. I have grandkids, and it's very painful because I did raise her in a very cult-like manner, and I produced this child. I trained her to be that way. I was very in the group, but one of the things that I find interesting is the people who are in the group who are not critically thinking, they don't seem to have as much, they seem to be more understanding. They're like, oh, we don't care, the church is great, I don't take it so seriously. And when I was in, I noticed that I took the church extremely seriously. And I think that I always thought like I was deeper in the cult, but I was actually fringe because I was critically thinking. Things were inconsistent, so I was very frustrated. Like women should stay at home, they shouldn't use birth control. Yet I was in D.C. in the military, and my husband was in the military. There were career women in D.C. who were relief site presidents, and I was like, what is going on here? So I would get deeper in the cult because of the confusion and buckle down and say, no, women shouldn't work, and repress myself more in my desires for a career. But anyways, I always thought that the people that didn't take it seriously would be the ones leaving, but it ends up being the people that did take it seriously who are leaving.
Yeah, I think it's kind of really good observation.
Fascinating. I think it's fascinating. And my question for you is, as they buckle down and become seriously militant, which I've seen a pattern of lately in conference in Russell Nelson, I don't know if that's going to be a route that's going to work for them, because the people that critically think and analyze information critically, who take things seriously, are going to put up with that because they're going to, see that that's inconsistent with Scripture. And I don't know. I just wonder what your take is on this change, and if it's good, if you foresee them becoming more militant or more loving, like the people that are staying in. I talk to them and tell them my problems. They're close friends for 20 years, and they really do want to listen. And they just say, well, why did you take it so seriously? I don't understand. They're just men. They just have mistakes. And I said, oh, they said they spoke for God. And they're like, oh, I don't think that. And so then, is this cult behavior going to work on them when they don't take it seriously? I just don't understand. The conflict with me is very strong. Yeah, that's all.
Well, I mean, there's some really good points there, and it's some observations that you can't help but make. I think the first one I want to address is it's really the ones who took it very seriously that leave. And I think that's very true because a lot of the people, particularly the ones that are most vocal after they leave, that want to talk about it, a lot of it is because I guess as deep as you were in the groupthink of the ideology of the church, where you allowed it to completely shape and form your identity, when you discover that it's wrong, it's almost a deeper wound.
Yeah.
And so And part of it is like the church almost like teaches you the things that you would need to reject it. It places such a high priority on personal integrity and honesty that when you realize that those very things betray the moral authority of the church itself, then you, in one sense, you are reclaiming your own personal integrity and honesty by then rejecting the system that is based on lies and deception. And so as you move out of it, it's that same very deep personal commitment to integrity and honesty that facilitate you rejecting it and moving on your own personal path with that authority now centered within you, not displaced to some, religious person there. So I think that's an important dynamic to see with it. The other thing is that it's very tempting to just place the church in the category of cult and refer to it as a cult and say all these things are cult tactics. And it turns out if you're trying to reach and interact with family, friends, and loved ones and explain the difficulties with that, that's probably one of the least productive things that you can do.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't tell them it was a cult. Yeah. Maybe pointing out the inconsistencies in doctrines. They don't even care about that. Like that, I guess that's unproductive too, I guess. Yeah.
Well, and then there's this whole thing where it is, people toss the term gaslighting around a lot, but I think this is one instance where it really is a form of gaslighting, where when you're growing up, as you're listening to the brethren, you take them at their word. When they say, even in the Sherry Dew quotes from yesterday, she repeats that idea that whether by the Lord's voice or the voice of the prophets, it is the same. So these men speak for God. And while they may not be perfect, they are the most perfect. And their motives are flawless. And so it's kind of like, we're going to say they're not perfect, but really they're more perfect than anyone. They're more perfect than you. And so, of course, you're going to defer your own personal judgment and conscience to them. And then when you discover the history, discover the actual problems where these men claiming to be prophets, had their immoral teachings thrown in their face. If you look at the issue of race with people like Stuart Udall and Lowry Nelson, where they confronted the brethren with the problems of the way that they're framing the issue on race, and they retrenched and doubled down on this is God's will, God's commandment, and I'm the prophet speaking the will of God. And then you compare and contrast that with Sherry Dew's statement that these men are the most perfect on earth. You say, well, no, this does not work. And but then you have friends and family who say, well, you're not supposed to treat them as though they're the word of God. Why are you taking it so seriously? We take it seriously because these men claiming to speak for God say that it is the most important work. And your interactions, your standing before God, which encompasses all of this obedience to all of the things that they say, is the single most powerful determinant for your eternal salvation, which is tied into all of your family connections. And so, of course, you're going to take it seriously. I mean, the response to that is, why are you not taking it seriously?
Yeah, that's frustrating.
Because if it's true, it matters.
Yeah. If all the people, it seems to me now that I didn't know this. I always thought I was, for the past year and a half that I've been going through this, I thought I was the most deeply brainwashed one, the most deeply dedicated. But I'm starting to find out that I was fringe the entire time, and the deeply dedicated are the ones that shut down completely the critical thinking, completely the questioning the doctrine or thinking or even processing it. They seem to be the ones that I thought were on the fringe. I thought that they were going to leave. I thought they didn't, they would, I'm embarrassed to say this, but, where their kids would wear the immodest clothes. I was like, my kids' jeans are going to be to their knees. These are the ones that are making it, the ones that are like, nah, who cares? Taking everything very lightly. Where I was militant, this is embarrassing, but I was just just trying to defend my existence in the church by being serious. But anyways, I'm embarrassed to say that, but I thought that I was deeper in for this past year, and then watching the Sherry Do movies, videos, and kind of referring back to my some of my cult books that I've been studying, I realized that I was actually fringe because I hadn't completely lost my personal critical thought. I didn't have complete personal closure of thought.
Well, I would say that maybe rather than framing it as the depth of your commitment in doing what you think is right as the thing that defines you as being the most indoctrinated, rather than that, just saying your willingness to call out inconsistencies rather than to simply accept whatever inconsistencies happen. Like if you read 1984, I refer to it a lot, and we've talked a little bit about O'Brien and the torture scene at the Ministry of Love, where he holds up four fingers and tries to get Winston to say what they are. And the difference is if you're willing to simply accept anything that a general authority says as the truth in the moment that they say it without any critical thought about what this implies for things that have been said in the past, if you're willing to just accept the brethren at their word at any given moment without any critical thought, then even if you are deeply committed or not committed, because there are Jack Mormons who are like, I know it's the truth. I'm just, I'm okay with my telestial or terrestrial existence, but I'm going to defend to the death anyone that, against anyone that criticizes the brethren, because I've encountered people like that. They're like, I'm not perfect, but these men are where it's at. And so it's more just like your willingness to suspend that critical faculty and always accept what the brethren say. That kind of, to me, is what defines people who are at that deep level of indoctrination. Whereas you can have people like yourself who, we're tied very much into our sense of wanting to feel that we are good and moral people. And so when they provide us a moral framework that says this is what it is to be good, your children wear shorts to the knees, you have modest clothing, you don't drink and everything, then we accept that, internalize it, and make it part of our identity. And the more that we can do that, the more we have a sense of our own personal goodness. And it's a very natural thing for us to want to do that because I think there's a very human need to feel like we're good people. Yeah. And when you start to see that contradiction, though, and I think this is why the November 15 policy that banned children of married gay couples from even baptism was such a deep cut into the heart of many people who up until that point were willing to completely defer to the brethren, is because it's a deep moral contradiction between, there are some deeper things that we understand to be good, and the notion of Christian love and acceptance and not holding children accountable for the sins of their parents. All of that is some pretty deep programming. So that was something where it contradicted some things that we understood as inherently Christian values, and that woke up a lot of people.
Do you think that this, if they clamp down, is your prediction that they're going to clamp down more into a cult-like system, or do you predict that they will try to be more, less shunning? I mean, what direction? I guess I go back and forth.
I think there's an ideological battle that is not violent or fierce, but is just subtly taking place through the way that they implement policies, and it's directed primarily by the character of the person who sits in the highest velvet red throne. And so for now, we are stuck with Russell M. Nelson, and there are some things where they are kind of buckling down and being more hard-nosed about. And there are other things that they are loosening or setting the groundwork for more progressive changes in the future. And so we'll just see what the character of that type of progress is under later leadership. We've got to get through Bednar and Oakes. And I think Oakes in particular is going to be a little more hard-lined. And it'll be the influence of people who have a much softer take on it. Like, Garrett Gong has got a time ahead of him. I think he's probably going to be one of the more moderating influences in it. And, as those forces battle it out in their various meetings and as it filters on down through policies and what actually happens, there's going to be a change. I think overall it'll be more accepting, more towards conventional Christianity. and less dogmatic. It'll just take time, and there may be. I think we're in a little bit of a moment of retrenchment where we've gone back a little bit with Russell M. Nelson, and.
Do you think that will work on the people if they did buckle down? If, let's say, Bednar did buckle down, became very strictly like we're shunning people who leave, or I don't think that'll work on this society as big as it is with as much information as that. I think that would really backfire on them. I'm hoping that that's true.
Has. Yeah. I think we saw that in real time with the November 15 policy. They went the strict route. They went we have the moral authority, we're not bending to society route. And then they saw the carnage. They saw the loss of membership. They saw the loss of goodwill in our society. They saw the negative results of that. And so they readjusted, recalibrated, had new light and revelation. And I think if there is a step like that taken in the future where, again, they double down on something that's a deeply divisive moral point that they don't have the moral high ground on, and then they see the repercussions of it, then they'll be forced to soften their position. And I think that's the type of progress we'll probably see, something like that.
That's very hopeful. Thank you. Thank you for that insight. I think that's real and hopeful at the same time. I'd like to see reality, but I also don't want to give up hope, because sometimes when you read some of these cult systems, it can kind of scare you that people can be manipulated so badly. But I'm hoping that people are. I don't know.
Are you reading the book by Steve Hassan about combating mind control?
I have read that one. Right now I'm reading this one, Take Back Your Life, Recovering from Cults and Abusive Relationships by, it's Janja Lalich.
Janja.
It's really, really good. And it kind of breaks down a lot of things that I have read. When my son came home from his mission, I showed him the other book, Hassan, and he's out. He got home a year ago, and he's left. He's taken his name off the records. And my parents have. My husband has not taken their name off the records. My parents have taken their name off. I went. I've been very tactful about the entire thing, but very factual. And I've had my entire family, my children, leave besides one daughter so far. So I've had. I've been very happy with my results. I'm so sorry.
I think I moved my brothers from kind of lukewarm Mormon to double down Mormons. Just by being so tactless in my early confrontations with them. They still
I think that your advice and John Delen's advice were forerunners to help me. I watched hundreds of hours of information and was very, very, very careful. I haven't been so good lately. I've been with the friends who are coming at me from the stake who I don't care about as much. I've been pretty unhinged. I don't like it. So I just don't want to take all your time. But like the process, I think that the forerunners, a lot of advice. I've consumed massive advice of how to handle it. I'm not doing very well with fair weather friends. So, anyway, thank you.
Thanks for the call, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay,
right, take care. Bye. Okay, so if you want to join the conversation, you can call 210-422-2222. Yu-Gi-Oh has decided he's going to be a well-behaved pooch today. We got another call. Hello, you're on Talk on Things and Stuff.
Hey, how's it going, John? It's really good to hear from you.
Hey, what's going on? Hold on, I don't know why that's ringing. What's on your mind?
So I got a couple of questions. I'll go with the one that's probably going to expire in time the soonest. You did kind of a revisit when you hit 10,000 subs, and one of the things you went over was your stance on the military. Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong, you were a combat medic in the Army?
No, I was a physician in the Air Force, a radiologist.
Okay, so an actual medical degree holding professional.
Mm-hmm.
And you left because you felt like that was enabling a machine that was kind of out of control, maybe. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think that video's up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a longer conversation, but looking at the history of America's engagement in wars, in conflict, and in asserting its military presence around the world, I started to see that it did not align with my own moral sense of the just use of force in combat. Looking at certain amounts of hypocrisy in terms of what we as American citizens would tolerate and accept any other nation to do to us, and what we have done to other nations, seeing how the actions, if some other country was to do to us what we've done to other countries, we would certainly fight back against it. And if that country then labeled us as terrorists, then I could see how continual conflict and escalation of violence continue to be a problem. This was in the middle of, we were seeing the worst moments of Iraq and Afghanistan casualties. I was seeing the price that we were paying in terms of the lives and families of people younger than I in the military. And none of it, when I came to the end of all of my study of that, made me want to be a part of that system.
For sure. Well, and thank you for refreshing me on that. Again, I would have watched the video to help you not have to repeat yourself, but thank you.
Yeah.
On that though, you speak very broadly, but it sounds like you're speaking mainly about the intervention of the U.S. from roughly the 1950s forward. I'm assuming you feel like World War II, we were relatively justified, and conflicts before that are less in the category you're describing?
I think that if you go back and study history, there's probably a lot to be said of the nature of the resolution of World War I and how that set up the conditions that led to World War II. And so you can do a moral and ethical analysis of how you resolve conflict and what the proper way to do is there. But I would say certainly since the 1950s, that's more where you start to see our own intervention in other countries that foment war or lead to the conditions that we then claim that we're justified in engaging in wars, in combats. And then you kind of combine that with a move that we had in our government to really allow the executive to be the primary determinant of the battles that we engage in, rather than leaving that decision in the hands of the representatives of the people. And furthermore, kind of detaching financial consequences from it, where you continually just go into greater and greater debt. And the things that we were warned about by Eisenhower about the corporate entities that make up the logistics and supplies of war having a vested interest in continuing and fomenting that conflict. They call it the military-industrial complex. I think all of those powerful political forces do have a role to play in why we've seen continuous conflict. And not only that, but the propaganda aspect of why we as an American people continue to be at war, but we are not in a war mindset. We are detached from the cost that we are playing. It's not even part of a discussion, and yet we still have soldiers that are over there in conflict dying. There's a documentary called Dirty Wars that was published, and it came out with a book as well. There are some pretty brave journalists that went in and documented some of the things that we were doing in the conduct of war in Afghanistan. And it's just morally reprehensible. And not only that, when you look at the things that we were justifying when we do it in terms of the methods and means of torture, of waterboarding, the things that we learned from entities that we would consider to be war criminals and rebranded it when we did it, and said that it was a justifiable use of a force in the form of torture, even when the evidence was that information gleaned from that paradigm was not actually reliable and should not be as actionable or reliable as other less,
more humane way of gathering information.
Exactly. Right. And then when you see how, the debriefings that we do from people who were tortured by, people we can say were war criminals in the past, were part of a database that then our government mined the information from that database to form our own enhanced interrogation techniques. When you learn about these things and you realize that are we the baddies moment has come upon you. And then you just say, I'm not a pacifist. I do believe that there is a role for using force to defend your life, to defend your family's life, to defend your national sovereignty, but that does not extend into aggressing upon other countries and doing things that are morally reprehensible in that case. And that's where it's really, I talked a bit in that video about the difference between the two main branches of just war theory, which is the moral foundation for how a ethical nation conducts itself in war. And by separating how you conduct war and saying, okay, for the soldiers, it's just, whether or not you can bomb a hospital, whether or not you can use excessive force, you guys only have to worry about that. And then you're ethical, you're fine. And then the justification for entering a war in the first place, you do not allow the people who are actually conducting the war on the ground level to look and evaluate whether or not the war is justified in the first place. Because if the war is not justified morally and ethically in the first place, then it doesn't matter what you're doing. Whether you decide to bomb a production facility versus a hospital, it's not ethical because the entering into the war in the first place is not ethical. And so by separating those things, court-martialing anybody who is actually at the ground level, if they raise a protest or an issue of conscience on that issue, you're creating a system where you're facilitating the abuses of war. And
and definitely,
anyway,
I feel like
that's just
you're
not a
wrong.
system I wanted to be a part of.
For sure. Well, and in the 1960s, when you're in the Vietnam conflict or Korea, when you're dealing with a draft and people are getting court-martialed for that kind of behavior, I think that's a different analysis than, say, Iraq or Afghanistan, where it is 100% voluntary. But I agree with you. Once you're in, I was in. I'll tangent very quickly, just so you kind of know my background. I actually joined in 2007, kind of at the peak of the Iraq War, and my attitude then is this will tangent hopefully well into Mormonism. I know that's more the flavor of this, but I joined to defuse bombs because I thought that's what was killing not just Americans, but people in Iraq and Afghanistan. So for me, the attitude was essentially a minimize suffering or reduce suffering. And it seemed interesting because I knew you were in the medical field, that you were kind of playing that role as well. Now I get the attitude of analyzing the overarching principle of it. And of course, this is any private citizen that isn't the president isn't going to be making a huge difference as far as what conflicts we do get into or not. But I felt like at that time, the most I could do to reduce suffering was to mitigate the harm rather than not going in. Whereas and I did get out after my contract expired because I felt like the good I could do had kind of peaked. And so I moved on to other things. But my analysis, I still have friends that are in that still do that. It's not, I don't think any of us joined to go kill people or try to inflict American morality on the rest of the world. But that's super niche to defusing bombs. It's not the majority of the military, to where, your approach of getting out, totally support, totally have a very intimate understanding of a lot of the attitudes and experience behind that. But it doesn't seem like a very tenable one for everyone in the military to have, especially when I think more good than harm. I guess maybe this is where we might disagree, is I think more good than harm is done by the military and to the members of the military. There's a lot of pain, don't get me wrong, but when I look at the world, I don't think it's fair to say that our military does more harm than good. But again, that's my feeling. But as far as Mormonism trying to minimize pain, having left, that's the attitude I've had. So just wanted to kind of share that with you and get your thoughts as far as, do you think that your stance on the military and your reasons for exiting are applicable to everybody, or is that untenable?
Yeah. No, I think I can't say that it's just a very simple issue. As soon as the flip switch, then it's like something you don't even have to think twice about it. It's something that I wrestled with because I think we even see this in the context of church. When you wake up to the difficulties and the problems in church history and the church conduct today, you're left with a choice. Do you simply get yourself out and live your life on your own terms? Or do you stay and try to make a difference, try to move things in a positive direction so that a lot of people can benefit from this institution abandoning the bad parts that are composed of it and moving to a more helpful, enlightened thing? And so in the military, I struggled with that same thing and these same questions, because then as a physician, you have the option when you get out, there's a kind of a very smooth pathway to be part of the VA system. And I think I would probably be okay with being a part of the VA system, because from my mind, that is no longer being in the active military, polishing and shining up the weapon that the military is in the hands of an unaccountable executive, but it is more helping people who themselves have been victimized by that process. And so, I mean, I could justify that. I just came to the decision for me, and my own moral position that I could not be there. And some of it was, I think there was a time where, you look at the question of, okay, let's now take a hypothetical scenario where it's very clear that the executive, the president, is ordering the military to do something that is against military principles, against military ethics. He orders his general to do such and such, and the general sees it as a violation of his moral character as a military personnel and an abuse of power from the perspective of the executive and the military. And so that general then stands up and says, President, I refuse that order and tender my resignation. Okay, will that have an effect? Well, the president's just going to promote whoever is next in line, who will have to understand that that is an order that they are going to have to do. And maybe it's so egregious that every general who comes up to that point is going to resign, but it's not likely. There's going to be somebody who's got ambition, who knows how the game is played, and is going to do it. And I just take that, and that kind of trickles down throughout the entire military. And for me, a lot of it was as soon as I saw, particularly as a physician, how the physicians of conscience who tried to follow their conscience were court-martialed when they started to look at the moral foundations of the combats that they were engaged in, not even of just should we enter the war, but how are we going to use medical expertise, the thing that we as a human civilization have doctors from other countries share information, because this principle and practice of science healing medicine is something that it crosses national boundaries. There's no national boundary to it. And if you look at medical ethics, the whole triage of who you treat, whether it's enemy combatant or your person, there's things that are antagonistic to the goals of the military that medical personnel are supposed to ethically follow. And when they're punished for that, I just saw it as a system I didn't want to be complicit in. There was also a moment where I was overnight on call as a radiologist. It's very different from an ER doctor or a surgeon, but there are moments where we do come face to face with patients. And there was a young trainee who I was called to our MRI magnet for because he was terrified. I mean, he was just shivering and did not want to get into the magnet. If you've ever had an MRI, there's a large bore tunnel that you go into, and it's very claustrophobic inducing. And I don't know what this young man had seen, if he had been deployed before, but I saw that he was in a level of distress that I couldn't, I'd never encountered before. And there was a surgical fellow over him commanding him to get into the magnet, and he was just paralyzed with fear. And I was able to, because of rank, dismiss this surgical fellow person and sit down and talk with the patient. And the things that I heard him saying was that he had no choice. He had to get in the magnet. It was an order. It was a command. And if you're a member of the medical profession and you've paid attention to the ethics of that profession, you understand that that is in no way consistent with medical ethics to order a patient against their will to undergo a procedure, whether it's an imaging procedure or a surgical procedure. That is contrary to the heart of a physician. And so that caused me to think, and I did some studying. I'm saying, is it legal, ethical, and moral for a military commander to order a procedure to a person? And in the military, it is. That's part of the control that the military has over your life, is that you are subject to direct orders, including medical procedures. In certain situations, it would be defensible from the military sense of justice. And for me, that was just like, okay, I've now in a system that is not only antagonistic towards me as a physician acting on my own conscience, but it is also antagonistic towards people who are patients, who should be able to rely on the medical profession to respect their dignity and their autonomy as human beings. And for me, that was where it's like, maybe there's people, and there are good physicians that stay in the military and they do so. And a majority of the time, you're not going to be asked to act in conflict with your own personal conscience, as long as you're not looking deeper into, why we're involved in these wars anyway. If you're only looking at what am I doing to help this person at this time, then that's fine. But the thing is, this is not me just coming up with this out of the blue. The more you read about it, the more this has been a struggle for people in medical profession overall. There are healthy debates about whether or not it is even appropriate, ethical, or moral or just for somebody to be a physician and in the military, because those priorities are all convoluted and all messed up when it comes down to the life of a soldier and what side they're on and what, as a physician, you're ethically bound to do. And there are some people that say there should be a outside entity that is outside of the military chain of command, has a completely different set of uniforms, and they engage in health, in medical services for people in military personnel, so that there's not all of this mixed agency on the part of the physicians involved. And I think the Red Cross, as it was instituted, tried to keep that separation and try to follow that moral line of thinking on what we do with medical professionals in the context of battle. But this is, it's just something. For me, my transition out of Mormonism did not start so much with discovering problems of church history. It started with developing my own moral framework after examining these issues and looking at the ways that people have built from basic foundational moral principles about non-aggression, a moral framework that was independent of religious decree. And as I started to formulate that and see that as something I connected with much more as a moral vocabulary, a way of looking at the world, then I started to especially see how the actions, teachings, and history of the church were in conflict with that. And that, I think it's almost different, because if you just focus on the problems in church history, the things that they do, but you haven't really built up a moral framework by which to judge anything outside of just those blatant, egregious stuff, then as you leave the church, it almost feels like, well, there's no morality, or everything is, and this is, the church kind of plays on this. They're like, oh, moral relativists. They're all over the place. And so they use the bugaboo of that moral relativism, saying, if you don't accept our pronouncement of what is true and right, then you're just going to go with anything. And that's all those people that are non-Mormon, they're just being tossed by the winds of whatever. But if your departure from the church is on the basis of your own moral framework that you've developed that is independent of any particular religious authority, then your rejection of the church leaders and the church's own sense of authority is on one hand. And as you make your way through the world after that, you're going to see a lot of other people try to impose upon you their sense of what is right and what is wrong, what is just and what is moral. And you can start to see there's a whole bunch of conflicts with what may be your pre-existing moral foundation, even with those things that aren't even necessarily religious, because there's a whole lot of people out there ready to tell you what constitutes evil, and they do it on terms that would paint even someone who would like to remain silent and not aggress against anyone else as evil. And so that's just how that goes.
And the way you describe the military and essentially that power structure, and maybe even a culture is the right way to describe that. The way you say it, I feel like you could take this audio clip and just replace the word military with the church, and the number of parallels is disturbing, to me at least. And I agree with you with everything you said on that, and specifically with your moral core and potentially the evolution or the development, refinement of that as you're wrestling with those in the military, providing a foundation of analysis for the church itself as well. To me, it's interesting that in an alternate reality, you might have ended up, analyzing the church through that lens and then reaching those conclusions with the military in the opposite order. Because it seems like, anybody could go kind of chicken or egg with that. For me, it was a core value for me is integrity and honesty. And in the end, as far as the church, my integrity was more important than my testimony, and trying to maintain that through transitioning out did take a lot of work. And I don't like moral relativism, but I also think you're right that when you do leave a high demand fundamentalist religion, the potential for that pendulum, when held under so much tension by either a military mentality or a religious mentality, there's a risk of that swinging incredibly out of control. But the way you describe yourself is kind of weighing down that pendulum so that it doesn't just go crazy when that spring tension releases. It's just very interesting to hear your perspective and your path through that, because it's not something that I typically see, in the Reddits or the Facebook post, there's just a lot of reaction and emotion in there, which is fine. It's totally justified, and I think it's important for the people experiencing that to experience it and to heal from that. But it's very nice to be able to hear from you and talk to you kind of about your, I think, less common experience in transitioning both from the military as an interesting point of topic, but using that as an insight to your position on the church. So thank you so much, Sean. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I think to your point about pendulum swinging, if you find yourself not being able to say anything good at all about this thing that you've left, whether it's the church or the military, then just realize that, you may have such strong emotion and bias in one way that it's I don't know if it's clouding your judgment or it's maybe just distorting your perception, so it's harder to do. It's, getting away from black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil thinking is part of that transition. And it's really easy to just flip the switch and make it all bad or all good. And I find that I have more peace with myself, more peace with my life, more peace with my family, particularly if I can acknowledge the good in it. And I think I'm able to reach people and connect with them no matter where they are, if you're willing to both acknowledge the good and acknowledge the excesses of some of the people that they may perceive as on your side. And so I appreciate your comments and your call on that. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, John.
All right, take care. Okay. I put up a comment right there by one of the viewers about War is a Racket by Smedley D. Butler. Definitely a recommended little pamphlet to read there. It's a very interesting book. Check it out. On top of that, I think it was Dwight D. Eisenhower's warnings about the military-industrial complex. Okay. You were on Talk on Things and Stuff. What's on your mind?
Hey, John.
Hey there.
Hey, how's it going? It's FW.
Good. Oh, hey, what's going FW?
Yeah, not a lot, / also a lot at the same time. But are we on? I actually caught you this time.
Oh yeah, you're on live. I still got some time.
Okay, okay, cool. So I just caught the tail end of that last discussion, and totally serendipitous because I've been having this thought about you in particular so much lately, which is that same analogy of the pendulum swinging. And I kind of am filling in some of the gaps, but I'm assuming what you guys were saying was that in the church, you're like a pendulum that's stacked all the way up on one side with all of this kinetic energy, right? And then when you kind of cut that tie with the church, the pendulum releases and then swings all the way back up to the opposite side. And there we feel like we're at home again, but we're kind of in the same situation, just on the other side of that issue. And I had wanted to tell you that you stand out to me as, in particular, as someone who it appears like the pendulum came down and just went punk and stuck right there in the center. And you're so balanced with things. and I
have a very carefully curated persona. So you don't get to see me when I'm cursing to the wind.
Okay. Well, good. See, so I kind of want to see more of that because it makes me feel more human. Because I'm oh my gosh, I'm just this wild animal beast.
No, dude. I'm 5 years into this. How many years are you since you woken up?
A year.
Okay.
A year
please give yourself some time.
A year and a few months. Yeah.
Oh, man, I was a ranting, raving lunatic early on.
Okay, that's so good to know. See, that's just the perspective that is needed. And it's a little bit of a roadmap, so very cool. But mainly, I just wanted to just leave that comment. It's a compliment to you, and
I
and I guess it has to do with the greater discussion. So sure, I didn't really have much else to say.
Okay, well, listen, I know that you've messaged me a few times behind the scenes just with your own thoughts and kind of the things that you're struggling with. And I don't want you to feel like I've always had an answer to those things either. I mean, for me, a lot of my perspective is just I wrestled with these things a lot of the time on my own. I tried to search out different perspectives on all sides of these issues. And then when it was all said and done, this is kind of how I could make sense of things morally and ethically with myself and with the way I want to conduct my life. And so whether you're talking about issues of race or gender or anything like that, they're hard issues. And unfortunately, because we don't have a prophet who speaks for God, we can't just, surrender our critical mind and our judgment and just rely on what they say. But by the same token, there's a tendency to just rely on what the loudest voices in the room say, or the voices that if you disagree with them, they are going to lay the hammer down on you and call their mob justice on you. There's its own type of authority that makes it just easier to surrender to that as well. And so that's kind of the moment that we find ourselves in. So the struggle is real and we're all engaged in it.
Right. Agreed.
And I'm still waiting to get some of those apple cider donuts.
I know. I hear that a lot, and they do not fly.
I'm going to remind you.
They don't go in the mail.
I'm going to have to do a road trip at some point just so I can catch some of that.
That's the trick.
And I'm going to steal your recipe.
Well, there's not much there.
Okay. All right. Take care, man.
Okay. See ya.
Bye. All right. So if you would like to call and join in the conversation, the phone number is 210-422-2222. Maybe we'll get to our dear sister Sherry Dew's stuff. Let me see what I can pull up here. Share screen. And, all right. I'll share that. Boop. And we'll just get ready for that. All right. Hello, you are on Talk on Things and Stuff. What's on your mind?
Hey, nothing too much. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Perfect. I'm just calling in regards to a talk that I overheard the other day. I was over at my brother's house. He's still pretty devout. And he had this talk going on in the background by Gary E. Stevenson. And it was about finding balance in your life. And I really encourage anybody who wants to see firsthand how the church wants you to be fully immersed, even to the point where everything is the church. Even your own self-time becomes the church's time. Watch this talk. I mean, it's even my brother, who was very devout, even said, "Wow, this is terrible advice." And I mean,
that was the worldwide broadcast for young adults that happened last, I think it was Sunday, in the evening. And part of it was pre-recorded, and the other part was a very scripted, teleprompted discussion by Gary Stevenson and his wife. He started out with the metaphor of a helicopter and how all the different gears are synchronized with each other. And then he took that metaphor and said, let's apply it to our life. And he divided the different priorities that all of us have into priority for your family, priority for your employer, priority to the church, and priority to yourself. And self was at the very end of that particular line of gears. And,
I think
then everything was framed on that.
Yeah, and the funny part was, of course, he talks about how he crashed in the helicopter. But then, of course, went from there to talking about the sophistication of a rotary blade, which I'm sure everybody there's eyes just glazed over. I mean, the graphics were something, and just this idea trying to follow this complex system when he was talking about it was just brutal. And even my brother, who is actually and what was funny is my brother, who is a helicopter pilot, was like, that's not right. That's actually not how it was kind of critiquing that. So that was funny. But anyway, side note, but I really, listening to this, I mean, first of all, it's hard to follow because it was kind of constant contradictions and really, monotone. But following that list, it was so eye-opening because, okay, I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Church is second to last. But you quickly figured out in that list that the first one being family was, okay, family time, but constant indoctrination, family home evening, church, family prayer, waking up, scripture study, boom, boom, boom. So there wasn't any separation between family and church. The second one, of course,
such a good observation. And the thing is, I want to focus on that for a little bit, because when they moved to a home-centered church, what a lot of people said is, wait a second, this is taking, like, before the home was kind of a place that's a shelter from even kind of the church a little bit, because, you know, like, they have to ask permission before they can cross my threshold. So if I'm like enjoying family time, I can just let that be family time. I don't have to have this, all the burden and the guilt and everything, like, oh, I'm not doing, you know, enough church stuff. So there's like that whole head of guilt that goes there. But now it's home church, or home gospel, church supported study. So it's almost like they've now meshed the two. And so the rhetorical sleight of hand that you were alluding to, where they can say, oh, we're letting you focus on family, but that's, since it's now the same, one and the same with church, then the only proper way to focus on family is by doing as much church indoctrination stuff in the family setting as possible. And that makes it even harder, because, like, we've even heard in this show where you have a mother, an older mother who's, you know, got adult children now, who realizes she raised her children in this mode because it was all combined and all integrated in one. Then it's harder to extract. If you as a parent know that you've created this thing because you did not separate church from family life, then it's harder to get yourself out of it.
Well,
anyway,
and that's just it. I mean, and it just, so basically family life is constant indoctrination for you and your children, so they don't go astray. And of course that was, you know, led with some guilt trips and led with some, you know, some subtle threats that Satan will get you if you don't do this. And then the next one on the list, of course, was work, where they kind of said, listen, there's not much that you can do about work. Work, you got to pay, you got to make the money, you got to honor your debts, you know, so you can pay your tithing. Maybe slip a little bit of Jesus in there if possible, but hey, you know, it's work. Just don't bring it home with you. And then, so that is what it is. And then the next one was church, which was, I think, one of the most interesting, that said basically during church time, think of how you can serve the church. And he used the umbrella term of faith, but that basically encompassed of be in tune with the Spirit, so the Spirit can tell you how best to serve the church. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then the last one, self, which really I think should be at the top of the list, or second, because if you're not really in tune with yourself, you're not going to be much good to anybody else if you're in a bad state. However, going with this list, you have self at the end, and what did self become? It was kind of interesting. They talked about, oh, you know, it's good to get out and jog, maybe have a little bit of me time, because after all, you don't want to burn out. And then it quickly went into 3 talks or quotes where during your self time, your me time, shut yourself, and this was by one of the apostles, I forget his name, shut yourself off from the rest of people, because people can be loud, and go and meditate and learn best how the Lord can use you.
Yeah, I think he
and the second one
for that one.
And or the used car salesman, whoever that guy was. He used to sell cars. That's how I remember him. That's it. Yeah. And the quote was really telling, because he talks about how everybody's loud in his house and his grandkids are loud. He has to just break away from them to go meditate. So that's his self time. And then of course it went into, you know, constant prayer during your self time. So Satan can't pull you down. I think that was Holland. And then it ended with somebody from the Reef Societies talking about how she wakes up early every morning to study scriptures. Yeah. And so not only is yourself, so there is no church, there is no separation between life, self, family, work, or church. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little bit with work, but it's all, the whole end talk was, hey, this is really important. You got to, you know, operate on a balancing system, or else you're going to crash, just like I did in this helicopter. So make sure you find a really good balance. And there was no balance whatsoever. It was just pure indoctrination every second of every day. I mean, I was waiting for him to say something like, you know, if you're not having dreams about church and how you can serve the church, you know, you might be doing something wrong. Right. And I was just floored, and I just looked at my brother and said, no wonder the church rate, the burnout is so, you know, incredible. No wonder people are so depressed all the time. And he was like, yeah, this was terrible. And that was pretty eye-opening for him to even see this. And
he also used a story from his own life that I think, you know, a lot of times when we talk about burnout and the burdens that really weigh down on people, women get to be the focus of a lot of that, with great justification, because there is so much asked of them in terms of being homemakers, pumping out babies, having to have the perfect house, the perfect look and everything. So there is a mode of addressing that, but there's also a mode of addressing the consequences of the way that the church teaches that men should act as well, in that you have to be a provider. Absolutely. You've got to be able able to balance all of the things with your employer, your family, and the church. And you've got to do it all and be willing to say yes with a smile, and you never complain. And so he gives a story of his own life where he had started this own business. He was also like a bishop or some sort of church leader. And after a busy day, he came home and there was some sort of family gathering going on, and he just needed to go and sit and rest by himself. Right. And then his father came up and basically gave him a guilt lecture about how when he comes home, he needs to focus on the family and not let any of that other stuff happen to you. And by the same point, when he's at work, he needs to focus on work and not let any of the family or the church stuff. And when he's at church, he needs to focus on church and not have any of the other things. And then he invoked David Bednar's recent talk about how, you got your plates spinning of all these different things, and all you can do is just, when you're on one, you spin that plate and you let the other ones go. And then your other one, you spin that plate. And never addressing the fact that the church has so many different plates and the weight is so heavy that, if you want to take that moment to breathe, to collect yourself, now you've got guilt for allowing the influence, or allowing the repercussions of all this plate spinning that you're doing now, has caused you to take time for yourself rather than giving of yourself to your family. And so
there is no balance. It's just constant church. And I thought with his father, it was a guilt trip, but it was funny because I thought, you could have summed up your entire talk, which is telling the story. And your father actually kind of gave the best advice. He did say, listen, when you're home, just be home. Be home, be in tune with your family. Learn to separate. And I thought, there's the whole topic. It contradicts everything you said, because when you're home, it's not just you being in tune with your family. It wasn't some good advice like, hey, maybe learn what your kids are into, read with them, watch a movie together, maybe have some like Nintendo games together when you're home, learn what they're into, have some fun. No, what it was when you're home, it is scripture study, constant prayer, family home evening.
No, so there is never a separation. It could be good advice in terms of allowing yourself to be present in the moment with your family, but it is poisoned by this idea that being present and being with your family can only be legitimate if it involves these indoctrination things. And so, there's this one video that anytime something like this comes up, it just immediately springs to mind. I haven't brought it out in a while, so I do want to play it real quick and just get your take on it. Let me see if I can, I'm going to bring it up on the stream.
Now I'm all the way out here. I'm all the way out here on the east coast of Canada. Sometimes calls drop. It's a little funky, but so if I suddenly drop, it's not because I'm offended.
That's okay. I'm gonna play this. The audience will be able to hear it. I suspect you won't, but let me see if I can fix that, because I might be able to fix that. If I go to there, I think you're going to be able. You can hear me now, right? Okay, I think you're going to be able to hear it. Okay, here we go. Boop.
Church of Jesus Christ is not a social organization, and it's not just about what we do for 3 hours on Sunday. It can and it should be the doctrine, the authority, the ordinances, and covenants are the central focus of our lives. If they are not, I urge you to consider your ways. Being a member of this church affects everything. Where you go, where you don't go. What you think, what you don't think. What you speak, what you don't speak. What you eat, what you drink, what you wear. There is no aspect of your life, 24/7, that is influenced by your discipleship and devotion to the Lord Jesus Christ. If it is less than that, you are living far below your privileges in the gospel. It is not a burden. It is not a chore. It is the only source of enduring joy, purpose, and direction.
There must have been a bunch of kids in the background.
I don't know if you could hear that, but
screaming.
it was very much this totalistic perspective of basically, every aspect of your life has to be completely infused with the implications of the church and its demands.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, that's what it is. I mean, anyone who thinks, it's not a cult, it's not totally trying to control you. I beg to differ. Just one quick note just before I go. I served a mission, And it was quickly on my mission that I realized there is no me time. There is no you time. It's just constant. And I remember about a year in, I was trying my best to follow it and make it 100% all about the church. And then unfortunately, or not unfortunately, it was probably, we just hit burnout mode. Sorry, am I still on?
Yeah, you're here. I can hear you if you can.
Okay, sorry. It sounded like it went dead and sounded like a drop call. And so I looked up at my companion, half joking. I said, I would just love to go to the beach. Let's just go to the beach. And I served on the West Coast, and I'm from the East Coast. So the beach is a really important part of one's life. You just miss the ocean. And he was from Massachusetts, so had an ocean as well, obviously. And he said, I remember I was rubbing my eyes, and then I looked up, and he was just staring at me dead straight, saying, we need to do this. And I was kind of like, I was a little half joking, but okay, let's do it. And it was kind of the first crack in my shelf, to use that cliche term, but I just remember going to the beach. It was for 1 hour, and we just brought a blanket, and we just laid down, and we looked up at the sun, and maybe it was all that vitamin D that we were able to finally get. But for the next week, we were just rejuvenated, and it felt awesome. The burnout was gone. the constant stress, the constant ups and downs you have when you're on a mission, it was just gone. And no amount of prayer, no amount of whatever church stuff ever came close to giving me that feeling as when I just took a me day, not even a day, like a me couple hours. And I remember just at that point going, wow, yeah, this is why church is so long. This is why they want it to be such a constant in your life, especially on a mission. Because the minute you get away from it, the minute you realize, oh, I'm not going to explode into flames, I'm actually feeling healthier. It's just eye-opening.
Yeah. Well, I think the pandemic is having that effect on some people as well. We're starting to see people join things like the ex-Mormon Reddit, saying that it was really this breather of time that they were given from callings, from all the other obligations that allowed them to step back and to do that same type of recalibration and ask themselves some important questions about how the church actually interacted with their lives and whether it was a positive thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for taking my call. I really love your co-broadcasting with RFM. It's great. Yeah. So it's amazing. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, he's great to talk with. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. So let's see here. Do we have the good Sister Sherry Doo available to impart with us her wisdom? There was this one clip that it was really hard to hear this because I don't know where she got this from, but let's go ahead and bring it up here. If you do call it, I'll answer it, but just give me a minute so we can finish this here. Here we go. Boop. All right, here we go.
Fourth, the gift of the atonement of Jesus Christ. The Lord has declared that in the end times, the saints shall receive their inheritance and be made equal with the Lord. My feeble mind can't comprehend how we can possibly be made equal with Jesus Christ. But suffice it to say that when the Savior atoned for us, he made every good thing, every spiritual promise possible.
All right. You are on Talk on Things and Stuff.
Hey, John, the Streeter, Gippy Geezy here. How are you?
Hold on.
If you're out there and you're struggling, I want you to, number one, I want you to know that there is...
Oh, hold on. Saints Unscripted is teaching me how to avoid pornography. Let me go back to there. Okay, here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey there, John the Streeter.
Okay, hold on. Something went wrong with the audio again. Speakers, loop back audio too.
I called and it was an answer, but it was totally dead on my end.
I gotta do that.
No, this is before this call.
All right, I'm gonna let go of this. I'll remove that, and then I will stop that. Give me a second. Hold on, and then.
Hey, roll with me on this, John.
So
roll with me on
may
this.
be able to hear you, but I cannot. Let me see if I say something.
Hey, John the Streeter, can you hear me? Can the audience hear me?
My headphones are still connected.
Am I jinxed? Your other calls have been going through fine. Still there, sir? Ruh-roh. I can't hear you now, John.
I've lost control of my podcast because you can say anything you want and I can't hear it, so I can't tell if you're trying to get me censored by
No. Of course not.
I'm going to turn the on. That's not working. And if I
can the audience, I don't know, can your listeners hear? You think?
Hear that? We're having technical times. So,
if the listeners can hear me, donkey shame. Oh, donkey.
Maybe I'll fix it. Okay, that's probably not going to fix it. Okay, let me try to play something, see if I can make it work. Oh, okay, that wasn't good. All right, quit that. Okay, and hang up that because that's not working. I'm going to go to microphone.
Hey, John.
That seems to be working. Speakers.
Can you hear me, John?
That is not working. So if I disconnect that and connect it again.
Can you hear me, John?
Yes, I can hear you. All right.
Yay!
Sorry about that. It's working.
Okay. Is it all working? Am I jinxed? All your other calls were just fine.
I must be. I don't know what the deal is. My headphones just went crazy. All right. That sounds like Get the Geezer.
Yes, sir, it is. And John, roll with me on this, okay? First, I need you to flatter me. I need some flattery. Just tell me I'm looking good today. Well, you can't see me and we've never met in person, but just tell me I'm looking good today.
You are looking like a very handsome man today.
Thank you so much. Oh, the flattery. I will listen to every episode now because you flattered me. Hey, I heard earlier that I have notes. Hey, I want to share something here with you real quick, okay?
Okay.
I heard earlier in the time I've been listening that you were going to go into some of Sherry Do stuff. You've been posting some short video clips, 3 minutes or so from the Sherry Do talk. Oh boy, I missed it. So I actually wrote the quote down. May I share this? And please, I'm sure you were going to cover a lot of this anyway, but please, listeners, look for the stark irony. All right, this is a Sherry Do, one of your videos you just posted the other day, Flattery and the Noble and Great Ones, little 3-minute plus video. Okay, here we go. Sherry Do says, with confidence and dead serious, and nothing against Sherry Do. I know she thinks she's doing good, but oh my God. Here we go. Separating ourselves into tribes, okay, plays perfectly into Satan's hands because it leaves this unity. It leaves everyone more vulnerable into deception, including former members eager to justify their exit from the church. Social media inflames all of these divisions by dishing up snippets of fact that rarely represent the whole truth, and providing a forum for one of Satan's most insidious tactics, flattery. Her prophecy has come true. You flattered me, John. You flattered me.
I did it. Now you will follow me.
Hey, here's my thing. Okay, first of all, tribes, lately they're really hitting hard on the culture, right? As has been coming out in different ex-Mormons, podcasts and stuff. So they're hammering home the culture, but breaking it to tribes, and you always hear the Mormons, like a lot of people that leave the church, oh, well, this is my tribe, whatever. Well, okay. Oh, so all right. And then you got the what she says, the snippets of facts that rarely represent the whole truth. Oh my God, please do some research. Please get serious about your research and do research the whole truth. It to me, this just like blatantly discounts the pain, the suffering, the soul crushing, emotional heavy lifting that most of us that leave the church go through. And some people need therapy. In all seriousness, I mean, It just, I've seen the different stuff, and you watch the little conference, your eyes going to twitch and whatever. But this one really hit home to me, and I would love to hear what you got to say about that little snippet right there. Because that is messed up.
Yeah, if you watch that full video, there's a moment where it goes black and then it goes into something else, and that is because I had to put the flattery talk before I put the other talk, even though the other part took place before in the talk, because you have to see that there's this idea that for a narcissist, an accusation is actually a confession. So when they accuse, the critics of misrepresenting by only telling part of the truth that conceals the whole thing, it's like, that's kind of what all the lesson manuals in church history have been like my entire life. And on top of that, this whole thing where she's talking about flattery and how it's just to get people to follow you. You tell them what they want to hear. You're trying to build up their ego and inflate their ego, blow some smoke up their skirt so they like what they hear from you. They don't want to hear the hard truths. But at the same time, in that same talk, she gives like the most ego boosting thing. Like, actually, there's several ego boosting things. Like, one of the other clips is like, not only are we going to be redeemed and saved, but we are going to become equals with Jesus Christ. And so we are going to be gods, but not just any gods, not just another God. We're going to be on par with Jesus Christ. That's even when you go out and you look at other Christian religions, when they talk about theosis or apotheosis, they're talking about becoming gods, but they're not talking about becoming Christ or becoming the Christ, in general. I'm sure there's some weird sects that are like, oh yeah, you're going to be like Christ. But so that in and of itself is like this big ego boost thing. But then, how to know whether or not you in your position are noble and great. She goes that. So let's see here. Let's go ahead and play it. It's not that long. You gave a beautiful rendition of it, but she does such a good job herself. So let's see. We're going to.
Stark irony. Oh my God.
Perfectly.
Okay, so I got to bring it up. I'm going to go to share. We'll go to share screen. Hopefully I won't lose you like I did the last time, but we shall see. All right. Bada bing. You're still there. Okay, here we go. You may not be able to hear it through the phone because I had to change the audio thing, but everyone else will. So
perfectly into Satan's hands because disunity.
Okay,
separating ourselves into tribes plays perfectly into Satan's hands because disunity leaves everyone more vulnerable to deception, including from former members eager to justify their exit from the church. Social media inflames all of these divisions by dishing up snippets of facts that rarely represent the whole truth and providing a forum for one of Satan's most insidious tactics, flattery. How diabolical is flattery? Look at any antichrist in the Book of Mormon or anyone seeking followers for themselves. They are
So all of us critics are antichrists. There you go. You're welcome. Thank you, Sherry Dew.
Always masters of flattery. Sherem is a classic example. Quote, he had a perfect knowledge of the language of the people, wherefore he could use much flattery and much power of speech according to the power of the devil. Close quote. Flattery is telling people what they want to hear, and it is designed for just one purpose, to get followers for yourself. It is the impetus for fake news, and one of the reasons too many influencers celebrate rather than denounce wickedness. The old adage that flattery will get you anywhere is why some leaders make empty promises they have absolutely no intention of keeping. Our Heavenly Father did not.
Okay, so that black screen was the visual equivalent of an ellipsis. Just to tell you that this is not what just followed that, but this is from now earlier in her talk. So she laid out a pretty powerful argument that flattery can be manipulative and deceptive because what you're doing is you're giving people what they want to hear so that they like that message. It makes them feel good, and so they continue to follow you. And she's posing it as that is a diabolical, a satanic technique. And then she's associating it with critics of the church and saying that part of what critics do is that they only give you part of the truth so that they can lead you down the primrose path with their flattery, but it's really much more than that. Even though when you look at church history, part of the reason that we are critical is because we see that the church itself has done this. It's taken snippets out of the church's history, presented something that is a false presentation of what actually happened and deceived members in that process. And if you want proof of it, just go back to any church manual where they cover D&C 132 and take a look at the verses that they skip. And you'll see that right there. Okay, so then she goes, now we're looking, she's laid out how flattery is this terrible thing. You're just inflating people's ego by telling them what they want to hear. And now we've got a different part of the same talk.
Did not elect us for this era only to watch us.
Okay,
Our Heavenly Father did not elect us for this era only to watch us fail. We're here now because he chose us to come now. I vividly remember the 1979 General Women's Meeting. Yes, I am that old. When Sister Camilla Kimball read her ailing husband's address, in which he declared that much of the church's growth in the last days would occur because of women. This will happen, said President Spencer W. Kimball, to the degree that the women of the church reflect righteousness and articulateness in their lives, and to the degree that the women of the church are seen as distinct and different in happy ways from the women of the world. I've quoted that statement for decades. So it was stunning to hear President Russell M. Nelson declare in 2015 that the day that President Kimball foresaw is today. You are the women he foresaw. President Nelson then promised that if we would take our rightful and needful place in building up the kingdom of God, the Holy Ghost would magnify our influence in an unprecedented way. In another setting, President Nelson added this: if each woman really understood her divine identity and infinite worth, she would be filled with light and glory. If you've never experienced a spiritual confirmation of who you are, or if you could use a reminder, I invite you to study Doctrine and Covenants, section 138, and Abraham, chapter 3. Then ask our Heavenly Father if you are one of the noble and great ones. His answer will change and guide your life. Flattery is telling people what they want to hear. Separating ourselves into tribes.
So that's the thing. You know, when you talk to people from various different cults and ideologies, and you ask them, you know, what are some of the ways that the dogma and the doctrine, the ideology of your group inflated your ego, made you feel special, then you'll get a story about how your membership in the group is something that either bestows an elite status upon you or is proof of your elite status. And it could be, you know, if you climb the bridge to total freedom in Scientology, it could be that you are one of the privileged and elect in the Jehovah's Witnesses, or whatever it is. In Mormonism, we have this idea that there was a premortal existence. And in that premortal existence, there were some spirits that were even more noble and great than the unwashed masses. And those spirits were held in close counsel with God the Father. And they were preordained to be the leaders of the church, to be born into righteous Mormon families and to be high up on the hierarchy. And it's proof of their noble lineage. Now, early on in the church, this was used as a justification for racism. It was said that just because there were noble spirits, there was the unwashed masses, and then there were the less noble spirits, but they weren't the worst spirits. And those less noble spirits, they were willing to come to earth because getting a body on earth is so important. They would even get bodies that were hindered by handicaps, whether it's racial, national, or even physical handicaps. And that was the early teaching of the church. Well, they've since realized that that's a deplorable teaching, and it justifies and inflames racist and divisive, ways of treating people now. But now we've still held on to, though, this idea that there were great and noble spirits. And now we're going to allow the line between the great and noble spirits and the unwashed masses be at the membership of the church. If you're a woman in the church in the context of this women's conference, then you are one of the great and noble ones. Your spirit is inherently better than anyone else in history or in the world today because you are a member of the church. And it's this great and noble thing. If that is not flattery, I don't know what is.
And it's,
anyway,
John,
did I lose you, Gibby?
I'm still here.
Okay,
can you hear me?
Hold on, I have to reset this because apparently my audio doesn't like.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I lost you. The audience can probably hear you. But,
oh, really? Dog a shame.
Ridiculous.
Oh, dog a shame.
All right. Let me see what I can do about that.
Doggone it. Am I a jinx?
If you're talking, I can't hear you. So.
Okay. Oh, great. Oh, well, let's get John censored. Hi, John. I'm going to give you flattery while we're waiting here. You are one of the best modern-day core whores ever, John.
Reset my Bluetooth.
Is this core whore a fictitious name? I think I'm just going to replace the SpongeBob character. You are the best modern-day Squidward ever, Jonathan.
Okay, now I just heard Squidward ever. I can hear you again.
All right, here, John. I was saying, if they can't hear me, I was singing Donkey Shane, and I was also saying that that this is also Sherry Dew mentions as a core whore. I said, well, you're one of the best modern day core whores, John. Since core whore is a fictitious name, let's just pick a SpongeBob character. So I said, you're one of the best modern day Squidwards ever, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate you picking up on the irony. Yeah, I appreciate you.
You're going to have to break out the Cricket Master 100 on that one.
Yes. Okay. We got some stuff coming in the future with Gimpy Gizzard that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But thanks for picking up on the irony of that and bringing it to the attention here, because that's just a great quote. And speaking back to the very first caller I got here, she was talking about how listening to that quote really triggered her and made her feel, just a lot of anger or whatever. And it's funny because what I've realized in clipping quotes that I see as the most manipulative and just putting them with links to their original source, but without really any commentary, just saying this is what they are saying, this is what they mean, trying to depict it exactly as what they mean, not trying to distort it or anything. And I'll get a mix of people who are like, oh my God, I can't believe I ever listened to this crap and thought it was any good. It's so culty. And then I'll get people who are like, this is the most inspirational message ever. I truly believe that these are leaders of God and prophets and apostles. And it's like, it's the same thing. If you're in, you see those things as glorious and wonderful for the exact same reasons that if you're out, you see them as the most manipulative and harmful. And it all hinges on whether or not these people actually do speak for God. If they do speak for God, then it has to be glorious because that's God speaking. If they don't speak for God, then they are imposing their own personal bias, prejudice, and worldview on you in a manipulation that carries divine illusion so that they're capturing your own piety, your own sense of piety, your own humility before the divine, and they're exploiting it. And that's, I think, why so many people, when they get out of Mormonism, they're so allergic to the concept of religion altogether, because they've been hurt on those very sensitive nerves that religion, toys with.
Right, and I think, and also as a decades-long true believing Mormon, you kind of get lost in the gaslight or the fog. You it's like your mind disassociates a little bit from what's happening, and you kind of let so many things slide, and some of them just kind of stuck and stick on you, but somehow it all makes sense somehow, and you just don't see it clearly. So I'm not, I'm certainly not making fun of anybody. If anybody's listening that is a true believing Mormon, I'm with you. I understand completely. But but if you educate yourself, learn more about critical thinking, and I feel so bad for people I joined at age 20, but people that are raised in it, they're taught not to really critical think and just to follow blindly, and you have to kind of break away from that somehow and work it out. And once you do progress and process a lot of the stuff and deal with a lot of it, you can look at it and see it so much clearer. And it's amazing how they would just take things and just flip it on you, and the church claims so many things. I was involved with genealogy. Do you know the church claims that the computer technology, that happened, that has happened is Jesus did that solely. What the biggest reason he did that was for, of course, communications of prophets and stuff, but for genealogy work. The Lord had his hands in the computer. I think it was I forget which prophet said that. Anyway. But they don't claim everything. Are you kidding me?
No, I have an audio clip of Elder Holland saying the same thing. The whole reason we have the internet and Facebook and social media is so that the church can more effectively spread its message around. So they just capture anything that exists in the world and twist it to their own purposes.
Oh, and,
I gotta go. I gotta wrap this up.
Does that not go back to the little quote that Sherry Dew said about how social media inflames all of the divisions by dishing up snippets of facts? So which is it? Is it good or bad? See what I mean? You can't have it both ways, but the church does. And I said it before, I swear to God, if you look for it in these conference talks especially or whatever, they'll give you like a bunch of good, warm, fuzzy stuff. And that's why you had to start with this, this particular quote, you put it before all the other stuff, because you're going to get good and fluffy stuff, and true believing Mormons will make memes about it, and then they'll hit you with the velvet hammer. And I think when you show snippets like this, it's actually kind of like the power of demonstration. So good job, and please keep doing it. So anyway, I'll get off so other people can call. Thanks for taking my call, John, and keep up the good work, man.
Always great to hear from you, Gimpy. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Well, that wraps it up for today. So until next time, this has been Talk on Things and Stuff.